Well, it looks like we're going to have kind of a trickle of folks, but why don't we go ahead and get started? We really appreciate everyone attending this morning, and I definitely appreciate our panel that really represents a true diversity of subject matter expertise when it comes to opportunity zones and when it comes to the product of opportunity zones, which ought to be not just great buildings, but great communities. I am Doug Davenport. I'm the founder and executive director of Prospect Silicon Valley. We're going to be introducing our panel in just a moment. I just wanted to maybe make a couple of brief kind of observations before we get started. So Prospect Silicon Valley, first of all, is very grateful to the city of San Jose who provided funding for this event. And we're very happy to have a representative from the city on our panel today. We're talking about opportunity zones and we're talking about transforming communities. For Prospect Silicon Valley, this means a lot to us because our work as a social impact and innovation hub is really meant to drive together the different players that it takes to bring new ideas into application and new benefits into the world. So here, if we're talking about transforming communities through opportunity zone investments and through those kinds of projects, you know, that's a really inspiring term and you'll hear it a lot and you'll see it above a really nice picture of a new building. But really to get there, it takes a lot of focus, it takes teamwork, and it takes kind of unified intent to make a project like that really drive to new kinds of results. And it takes long-term thinking. It's not your conventional project and it's not your conventional location. It also takes money. Opportunity fund investments provide a different layer of funding than the traditional capital stack. It's a more patient form of investment, and it's focused on underserved areas. So it's meant to have a specific effect, and it's meant to really be a long-term investment in communities that need that money. So to get there, though, it really does take. I want to say it takes a village, but we're going to say that it really does take the partnership of everyone from investment to design to long-term operation and the technology side for that to happen. So it's about change, but it's also about innovation. So today we are fortunate to have 5 experts in their respective field of social impact, responsible investing, community development, design, and emerging technology to come together and talk about what opportunity zones can drive in terms of the benefits. So I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves. They've been coached on who goes first, and we're going to see if they remember.
Well, I think I'm first, if I remember correctly.
You are first.
So first of all, thanks for holding this event, and thanks for everybody for joining us today. My name is Kunal Merchant, and I'm the president and co-founder of CalOZ, which is a nonprofit trade organization that we founded in 2019 to support quality opportunity zone investments in California. We do it through a combination of events and convenings, education and training, policy and advocacy, and then pipeline development, trying to get programs and projects moving. And outside of CalOZ, I run a consulting company that does a lot of work at the intersection of business, government, and community, and have a background in public-private partnerships, having worked in local government, in business, and in the nonprofit sector. So this is a really interesting topic to me. I'm really optimistic about the potential of opportunity zones, but also realistic that it's going to take a lot of work and diligence from everybody to really make sure they fulfill on their plans.
Great.
I believe I'm next. Hi, everybody. My name is Colleen Danaher. I am Regional Vice President of Business Development for the Western U.S. for NES Financial. NES Financial is a Silicon Valley-based company. We're a fintech company, financial services and technology. We create a technology and that focuses on putting security, transparency, and compliance around industries that are going to specialized. We started as a 1031 qualified intermediary. We work in the EB5 space, which is raising capital from foreign investors and job creation. So lots of compliance, lots of paperwork, lots of potential for fraud and abuse. We also do traditional private equity administration and as well as opportunity zone administration. So everything from doing the fund administration for the fund, but also tracking all the compliance that's required by IRS and Treasury. So for example, the 90% test, substantial improvement, impact tracking. We're working with over 85 projects now. So really looking forward to having a conversation here and sharing some data that we have from the funds that we're actually administering here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Colleen.
Hey everyone, thank you, Doug, for putting this together. I'm Nathan Donato Weinstein. I'm an analyst with the Office of Economic Development with the City of San Jose. So we're the part of the city that works to help companies and investors come into San Jose and get an understanding of the landscape. And back in late 2017, my office got an email from the mayor saying, hey, what's this opportunity zone thing? Maybe you guys should look into it. And that was back when no one had really dug in yet. And that started now this multi-year journey that got us here today. And I'm excited to learn and share about what we've been seeing on this subject. So thanks.
Excellent.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Silkwood. I'm an architect and associate principal at RMW Architecture and Interiors. And our tie to this conversation is we're a 100-person architecture and design firm working in this case. Most of our projects that are relevant to this are commercial, office, and mixed-use projects. And we work in partnership with developers, in some cases in opportunity zones, to generate rich design. And today, what I want to contribute to this conversation is what's the business case for good design in opportunity zones, and how can we take advantage of the movement that we have here to create great spaces and great buildings. And I also happen to be a San Jose resident, and so I just have a deep commitment to the city of San Jose, and look forward to creating thriving communities through opportunity zones.
Great, thanks so much.
Hi all, this is Joe Amador here. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with everyone. I'm a smart buildings consultant. I focus primarily on a lot of the technologies and the companies deploying these technologies into large commercial buildings. Previously, I worked for a number of years as a product manager at Johnson Controls. I also spent some time at Lucid, which is now a portfolio company of Acuity Brands, also a product leadership role. And over the past 5 years, I've been working independently. What I hope to talk about here is not so much directly about the opportunity zone, but around a lot of the technologies that can be brought into those buildings that can improve health and wellness outcomes, can also improve energy and resource consumption, and just what's happening in that space, both because of opportunity zones, because of COVID, which I'm sure will come up, and everything else happening, and really, you know, maybe dovetailing with a lot of the points Stephanie wants to make in particular. So thanks, good to be here.
Right. So thanks. And so I think as everybody can see, you know, this is a real treat, because we have such a kind of an end-to-end kind of viewpoint of what's going on, that it really starts with understanding the need and understanding the potential, focusing the investment, a partnership with the community that's part of this, a real focus on the business case for the design, as Stephanie was saying, and really looking at the lift that's coming from new technology, which is very hard to really get into new spaces. But there's a clear need, especially these days, for new solutions and for new approaches. So I'm really excited for us to talk about this. We're going to kind of take this in 3 chunks. First of all, where are we with opportunity zones, and what are they showing versus maybe our aspirations? 2, what are we learning here about, in the first few years, and how have they developed, how are they performing, and what do the investors need for this driving force to really have impact? And then we're going to talk about the future and what the potential is, okay? And we've got plenty of time to do this. So let's make sure we make this a rich conversation. This is not a deposition. I expect much more than yes or no answers, and your long-winded opinions are very, very welcome. Okay, so first of all, where are we? So Kunal, Nathan, you're both looking at this in terms of the transformative potential of this particular focus and this particular investment called Opportunity Zones. So what's encouraging you so far about Opportunity Zones, both of you?
Sure, and Nathan, feel free to jump in. I think one question, Dave, Doug, is, are we sort of confident that everybody gets the basics of Opportunity Zones in terms of the audience?
Let's pepper in a little bit of what they are without taking everybody to school. There are plenty of sessions about that.
Yeah, there's plenty of resources. We have them on our website, calz.org. I'm sure others do too. But obviously, oversimplified, it's a tax benefit that if you are an investor that realizes a capital gain and you realize that gain and put that money into a fund that invests in a low-income neighborhood that's designated as an opportunity zone, you pay no taxes on your gain now, less taxes later, and no taxes on any appreciation that happens in whatever you invest in. So it's an idea to try to attract private equity capital to be patient in investing in neighborhoods around the country that are not historically accustomed to getting a lot of investment for the most part. So that's Opportunity Zones quickly. Again, Nathan, let's kind of tag team this, but I'll just go first on what's encouraging about Opportunity Zones. And there's a couple of things that I think are real positives. I think one is it's reinvigorating the dialogue about poverty and inequality and those that are left behind in the modern economy. I think there's this conversation and there's so many more that have happened over the last couple of years where people who are not accustomed to talking about these issues are looking at maps, looking at these issues, and it's focusing our attention on a really important, I think, structural issue for our country, which is the many people who feel left out and left behind. And I think that's a positive. I think two is it's forging unlikely coalitions. And so you have private equity professionals, real estate professionals who are meeting with philanthropies and community organizations and churches and nonprofits in ways they didn't before, and looking at neighborhoods and asset classes and geographies that they never would have looked at before. And those folks are coming together. And on the flip side, you have philanthropies and nonprofits who are thinking more like venture-oriented folks, more private equity folks, in a way that I think is a positive and will create more innovation. And then the last thing, and I think, Nathan, this is probably an area where you can speak to as well, is just there's some really exciting projects coming online, that there's actually money that's flowing into this marketplace, and projects are coming online that have real potential not only for financial impact to investors, but a social return on investment for the community.
I would agree with Kunal. Those are really valid points. For us at the city, we were really intrigued by Opportunity Zones because of the potential to attract that different type of investor, the mission-driven investor to our city, which traditionally we haven't really seen a lot of. And so for us, it gives us a chance to go out and kind of talk about some of our unique neighborhoods' needs and investment opportunities in parts of the city that maybe haven't gotten a ton of attention over the years. The development potential for Opportunity Zones was also huge for us because while we are such a huge part of the Silicon Valley economy and have seen a lot of growth over the years, we really have not seen as much development as our general plan really wants to see over the last 10 years since the end of the recession and the recovery. And part of that has to do with, there's a lot of reasons, but we lost a lot of the tools that the city used to have, things like the redevelopment agency, as well as other place-based economic incentives that existed at one time that are gone. And so Opportunity Zones was a chance to, bring in this additional, attraction tool to, quite frankly, help San Jose grow to the kind of to its full potential. I would answer Doug's question about what we've seen with sort of a little bit of a mixed bag. And I have a slide for that, but I can wait if you want to kind of go through and come back. I don't know.
If you'd like to share a slide, why don't you go ahead? I think people would appreciate that.
All right, let's see if this works. Here we go. Let's see. And I always get scared when I make it full screen, so I'm sorry it's a little small. But this panel was an excuse to kind of do a little soul searching on kind of what the last couple of years have really produced. And so I want to be like super honest with you and with our attendees. Kind of the really exciting thing for San Jose is that our downtown has seen quite a few investment acquisitions, primarily through one very active opportunity fund that formed called Urban Catalyst, that you've probably seen kind of out and about flying their flag. And they kind of created themselves to kind of take advantage of downtown San Jose. And they've now executed on a number of acquisitions and are into the city with projects. And it's really exciting to see. So that's great. I would say outside of downtown, right? Because we have 11 of these census tracts and they're very, very different. You kind of uniquely among kind of our region's opportunity zones, we've got the downtown, we've got kind of a suburban office market with the airport area, we've got industrial markets, and we've got kind of, we have a mall on the east side. We have not seen as much development activity or investment activity, excuse me, as I thought we would have seen outside of downtown. In preparation for this panel, I reached out to over 24 brokers and sort of VC connected types. Only one of them was kind of moderately familiar with the application of opportunity funds and equity investing in operating businesses. That's been kind of a missed opportunity and a disappointment, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I would say the census tract designations, while kind of great in some ways, are imperfect ways to define neighborhoods. And we've seen some downsides with kind of the way these are drawn. It is what it is. And then finally, the great thing about opportunity zones is it does give you an opportunity to kind of talk to new and different investors about your city and about kind of issues and opportunities in a way that you just didn't have before. And we've used that. We've used that as a tool to just do outreach to investors, even if it doesn't kind of lead anywhere ozone related.
Right.
That's just a little background.
Yeah, and so you've got the number one. I mean, just playing back to you, the opportunity zone in kind of aspect is providing, and the program behind it is providing somewhat of a unique stage for these select census tracts that have been already kind of selected for inclusion, right? That is part of the program. You're in a unique situation in that you have this, overshadowing other driving force called the Google campus and other things in downtown San Jose that might be slightly skewing interest in other areas. That's possible. But there was a question that I thought I should just go ahead and, kind of put in now, and that is, how does zoning factor in this? And are you looking at how you might be able to incentivize some other attraction by slight shifts in zoning?
Such a good question. I think the one big reason why downtown has gotten the lion's share of the opportunity zone investment in San Jose is because the zoning is so flexible and the entitlement process is kind of a little more streamlined. And that's really, really important. I would say that in the case of right, so we're all about density downtown. We're all about a mix of uses, residential, hotel, kind of, let's go. Outside of downtown, we do have kind of a more defined general plan expectation of kind of what the city wants to see. And so in kind of our more industrial areas, I would say we like them industrial. And that was part of the zone strategy when we were kind of talking to the state about the census tracts, because we thought the industrial areas are where you could put some of that manufacturing investment, some of the operating businesses that maybe are more industrial in nature in San Jose, and have them achieve the tax incentive, have their investors achieve the tax incentive. Let's use these industrial areas as a feature, not a bug. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that pan out yet. But I don't think we're ready to give up on that vision.
Okay. Any thoughts from our panel?
I just wanted to add, I think from what Nathan said, there still is that that issue of the challenges of the education, the understanding of the program. And Urban Catalyst is one of our clients, and they've been very, very successful in the San Jose area. But I still think that, you know, educating the communities and the developments on the understanding of Opportunity Zone is still a challenge.
I also think, you know, the momentum of what's been going on downtown has been building for years. And so we're finally starting to see not just the Opportunity Zone, but so many other things coming together at the same time. Doug mentioned Google, but that's just one of so many things. Some of the other blighted areas don't have those anchors to start carrying these Opportunity Zones forward.
Right. And I think this is illustrative of what we started with, which is it takes more than money, and it takes more than even a special or specially incentivized layer of money for these projects to go. It's gonna take a lot of kind of collective commitment to see those things happen. But there are good things happening across the country, and I thought, just as a quick maybe segue to our next kind of topic here, Kunal, maybe what have you seen as Cal OZ as some success stories that you might point to that are showing that, you know, there really is potential being realized here?
So there are incredible seeds of promise all around the state and around the country that are really powerful. They don't always make the headlines, but they're really powerful. So down in LA, for example, you have a group called Sola Impact, SOLA, South LA, and it's a for-profit entity with an incredibly powerful social-oriented mission, which is to expand the amount of housing available to low and moderate income folks in the neighborhood, and particularly folks who've been there for a long time. And they existed before OZs, but they've done a terrific job of leveraging this new tool as an additional piece of their capital stack to really expand what they're doing on one of the most fundamentally important issues of our time, housing affordability. In the Central Valley, this is a really exciting tool because if you think about it, if you're in the middle of the state, you have the same political and regulatory and often even basic cost structures that you have in the Bay Area and LA, but you don't have all that built-in momentum and infrastructure like you do in San Francisco, San Jose, LA. So you get a lot of the costs of investing in California, but you don't get that perceived upside that tends to migrate investors towards the Bay and LA. And what Opportunities Zones offer is a way to try to level that playing field, which is to say, hey, take a look at our state because a lot of the zones are here. You can get a tax benefit, and we're willing to work with you in really creative ways to build more jobs and all that. So Fresno has a tremendous ecosystem of people coming together around the Community Foundation, the Economic Development Corporation, and there's some really interesting opportunities there. There's a really cool solar energy project. There's certainly a lot of sun in the middle of the state for a lot of the year. And so as we think about alternative energy and renewables as a new source and an increasingly important source for California and the country, there's some really interesting projects happening down there. And that way, and Nathan can speak to some of the great stuff happening in San Jose, in the Bay Area, in Sacramento, and even in rural OZs, rural areas of the state, you have groups coming and putting together investment prospectuses where it's forcing the community to talk about, hey, what do we really want? And you see examples of, you know, grocery stores and small businesses, and again, more mixed use, affordable housing, all these things are coming online. So it's really exciting, but it's early stages. And we obviously will talk about it, but, you know, having a once in a century pandemic and the resulting economic challenges has a chilling effect on investment, and it certainly distracts government rightfully. So a lot of folks who began the year, you know, rubbing their hands together, okay, let's get into this OZ stuff, they suddenly have to pivot to, you know, COVID response and relief, understandably, right, at the state level, at the local level. And so we need time and we need patience. We need patience from everybody involved, but there are seeds of promise happening all around the state.
Right. That's I think really great. I would ask if you could share in the chat with all of the attendees, maybe the website for Solar Impact. And there's a question in the Q&A that I would appreciate if you could just answer privately for Martha there. Excellent. So I want to turn our attention to then what are we learning about the funds themselves? So, you know, what a driving force to have when renewal really starts to take shape, right? This is going to be, I think, a really special time for us. Colleen, how have the funds developed? How have funds kind of, let's say, evolved from the early vision to where we are today? And what could you tell us about performance?
Sure, sure. Great, thank you. What I'd like to do is I want to share my screen and show you a few slides. What we've done is, of the 80 funds that we're working with, we've gathered the data from those funds kind of at a national high level. And we came out with our data insights for summer 2020. Our fall 2020 version is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. But let me share my screen. I can give you, there's about 4 or 5 quick slides to kind of give you an overview of what I'm talking about here. Can you see my screen?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay, hold on one second. Got a little distraction here. Hold on one second. So what we're looking at right now is project location, and we have on the left all time, which means from the time the inception of when we're gathering the data. The project location was single state in the blue, and the orange is multi-state. Now we can see in Q2 of 20, it's transitioned just a little bit more. There's more single state activity versus multiple state activity. That's where those projects are located. Sorry here. Project location, overall all time, we see Florida has the most project, followed by California, New Jersey, and New York. But we can see over, let me move my little thing here so I can see this, the top 5 states in each quarter, progressing from Q1 19 to Q2 19. It was mainly the kind of the big real estate states, the kind of coastal states, so Florida, New Jersey, California, DC, New York. As we progressed over time through the various quarters, we're seeing a more transition to them. We're seeing some Alabama, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. So we're seeing this trend as it moves out into the more areas that actually need the opportunity zone incentives. Starting out with the big states that had the big real estate groups that can formulate the opportunity zones in those states, to now transitioning into the areas that really are in need. Asset owner, does the fund actually own the underlying asset? All time, we have this percentage chart of, yes, it was the asset fund owner was the asset owner. Now seeing that transition as it changes into the Q2 20. Fund type distribution. This was interesting as well. So all time we have real estate primarily, and then these 21% of operating businesses and 18% of both, a combination of both. As we saw in Q2 20, transitioned a little bit more. We do see more of operating business and 25% in the real estate sector. So transitioning of that fund type distribution.
Right, and what you're speaking there is the investments being made are in a business as opposed to developing a residential real estate project?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
I think that's an important distinction for folks, that the opportunity funds itself can be a long-term investment actually in a business. It is not purely a real estate play.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And then primary asset type, there's a lot of movement here. We can see that in the beginning, all time, there was a lot of diversification here going on within these different asset types, the categories of the asset types. Looking at Q2 of 20, we see the distinction of having 33% in housing. We have manufacturing, as well as retail and restaurant. In the subcategory for housing, we have affordable housing, we have student housing. So the housing market is really a primary focus for some of these opportunity zone asset types. Mm-hmm. And then the final one, target fund size distribution. Initially, I mean, there's a lot of colors or a lot of movement here. Initially, there was, when the regs first came out before the final regs, there was a lot of push for some of these larger funds. We saw funds that were size of 500 million, even up to $1 billion. And now, as the trend, as things are coming down in a sense, and the regulations are out, and people have a better understanding of logistics and the components involved in the opportunity zones, we're seeing the majority of the fund sizes are within the 25 million to the $50 million range. Those are the type of size funds that we see from our administrative perspective. I know there's other lists out there. I know Robotic has a really good one that talks about the number of dollar amount that's out there and the number of investments that are within the assets of the funds that they track. But also I wanted to share with you we also conduct a webinar series. We do a webinar probably once every couple months. I know Canal's been on a recent one we just did on impact. We do some, during those webinars, we post some questions and survey questions to the audience and in fact, some of the investors. And one of the things we ask is what's the investor motivation? And right now, initially it was the tax incentive back when we first did these 2 years ago, but now it's really moved to social impact. So 45% of the attendees had said that social impact was their primary motivator. The return of investment was second, and the tax incentive was third. So we're seeing that shift. Asked about OZ fund challenges. The number one challenge was finding the investors. 50% of the target audience said finding investors was a real challenge. Solidifying underlying projects was the next one, followed by the complexity of understanding the OZ regs and then putting the fund together. But it looks
Right. Colleen, I just mentioned your slides don't seem to be advancing. You might want to check that.
Oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't a slide. That was just something that I was just talking about. Sorry about that.
Okay. So that's interesting. Could you repeat those priorities? Could you repeat those 3 priorities?
Under the fund challenges or investor motivation?
Investor motivation.
Sure, under investor, I'm just looking at, because I have it over here on this other screen. Investor motivation, number one was social impact with 45%. And again, that shifted because initially it was tax incentive. We're really concerned about tax incentive.
Right.
But with social impact and community development and people looking at what they're going to do in the community, and the investors are really looking at what is my money doing? What is it doing in my community? I want to see it grow. I want to see the impact. So that was number one. Return of investment was number 2. And the tax incentive was number 3. And then
Right.
again, on the OZ challenges, it was finding investors, solidifying underlying projects, the complexity of the OZ regs, and putting a fund together. So those were the top concerns with fund challenges.
Right. Now, that's really interesting. And I'm going to kind of sew these things together in a second. But Kunal and Colleen, number one, Kunal, do you have anything to add to that kind of, the focus and the observation that Colleen was bringing here?
No, first of all, we're lucky to have NESF in this marketplace tracking this information, because we've been talking in poetry about opportunity zones for a while, and they're actually giving us the prose finally, like what is actually happening at an aggregate level. Colleen, I don't know if it was in this slide or the webinar, the thing that I loved that I saw in the deck was the emergence of investment in operating businesses, which I think there was a big expansion in Q2 of this year, which is exciting because for a lot of reasons that are understandable, if slightly disappointing, the first rush of OZ capital was all focused primarily on real estate. And part of that is real estate investors are just accustomed to hearing about a new government program and then figuring it into their capital stacks. 2 is if you're dealing with a 10-year incentive, it's a lot easier to imagine a piece of land existing in 10 years than a business in a volatile economy, right? Like there's common sense reasons why real estate was ahead. But from a social impact perspective, we're trying to really build economic vitality in these communities, and business formation is a really powerful way to do that. Businesses of, by, and for the community that are owned by the community, that employ the community, that serve the community. And that's really where we'd love to see more investment happen over a period of time. So I'm really excited that that's what Colleen's team is finding, is that investors are getting comfortable putting their dollars to work to build and grow those businesses. And I really hope that we can collectively do more, especially post-COVID, given the incredible violence done to our small business community around the country. We need investment in small businesses. We need it everywhere. We especially need it in these communities. And if opportunity zones can be a tool to get there, let's grab that with both hands and make it happen.
I was also super jazzed by what Colleen was showing, because the operating business thesis was kind of the whole reason behind some of our census tract not selections because we didn't select them, but sort of our feedback to the state. And I think some observers were kind of scratching their heads about, well, why is this zone in San Jose? And the reason was there was kind of really, really good, physical space for an operating business to locate, whether they were kind of an office user or an industrial user, as well as our small biz corridors, like on Alum Rock and stuff like that in Santa Clara Street. And, it was kind of a bet, right? And if we don't get that figured out as, through kind of the next couple years or sooner, I think it'll be a real missed opportunity for the program as a whole.
Absolutely. So, Colleen, Kunal, Nathan, and Stephanie and Joe, I am not forgetting you. We're getting to something. So, is this, it almost goes without saying, but I just want to ask the question out loud. Is this changing the way that projects are actually pitched? If investors want to see social impact, is that changing the conversation between developers and their investors?
Potentially. And I would just say quickly, I would predict that within 6 months to a year, it'll be uncomfortable for any opportunity fund to be discussing a project without some explicit conversation about social impact, which I don't think I could have said 5 years ago. How superficial that is it just a couple sentences? Is it marketing or is it real? That's to be seen. But I think, Colleen can speak more to this because you're really tracking this. I think there really is a sincere effort to try to do this. And I think the investors are place-based investors here and they care about these places. So I'm optimistic on that one.
Right.
And I would add,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to add real quick that I think even the developers are really invested in the community. So yeah, sure, the tax incentives is probably their primary focus, but I do think there is a social impact target that makes them want to enrich downtown San Jose, enrich downtown LA, Sacramento. So it's not necessarily one or the other, right?
Right. We're seeing even from our private equity administration, we're seeing even some of the traditional funds are going the ESG way. So lots of impact and lots of impact focus. And we've created a tool that's measuring the social impact using government, Census Bureau, Department of Labor statistics, as well as partnering with Howard Buffett, who created an algorithm for investment rate of return. That's part of our platform. And we're actually getting opportunity zone funds that might do their own administration on their own, but looking at us to help them just track the impact part of it.
Right.
So it's becoming a big topic.
So we're maturing here. And I think, in this conversation so far, what we've talked about is that opportunity zones, the idea, or as Kunal said, the poetry is, it sounds really good and it's targeted in a good way and the intentions are positive. It's taking a while for that kind of, let's say, special intent to kind of connect with the market. At first, it became an opportunistic kind of situation where we saw a lot of real estate kind of adding this into their capital stack. But it's starting to mature, and we're seeing that kind of the broader intent of opportunity investments are starting to really, what we believe will actually, provide direct benefit to the community and not raise so big of a specter around, the word gentrification when we start to think about a purely real estate based investment. And at the same time, I think we're also seeing that the investors' priorities are shifting toward, wait a minute, this is something we can be proud of long term, and it's not just the ROI. It is, how is this going to change things for all of us, and how is this going to change things for future investments? Which is a really great turnaround story. And as I said, in a time that's been easily one of the weirdest years that any of us has ever experienced, and certainly a lot of economic hardship. This is something that we can really look forward to as being part of the success story that we hope comes on the other side of this whole thing, right? So, as somebody once said, I told you that story so I can tell you this one, okay? and so we're going to shift to the future. We're going to talk about the potential for where this goes in the future. I think we've heard a whole lot of, serious kind of a tailwind here towards some really good things. And what I wanted to shift to is some practicalities about, one, what it really takes to get a project off the ground. Number two, what it takes to get a project off the ground that is really aimed toward a special outcome and a special impact, not purely financial. And then, where does technology start to really both help make the business case for the project, but also really make a difference. So I guess I wanted to maybe start maybe between Stephanie and Joe. From the time somebody has a really good idea and sees that, something like an opportunity zone investment could really help a project go forward, and they have an idea, to that thing being, the ribbon being cut and people being able to see a real manifestation of what just occurred. Inform people not just how long it takes, but what the process tends to be, kind of top level. So let's talk about that a bit.
Well, so I think one of the important points here is especially with Opportunity Zone, there's an investment timeline, right? And so as Nathan so well described in a talk that I previously listened to, one of the opportunities that makes San Jose achievable, especially downtown San Jose, is the ability to get a project out of the ground in an expedited manner. So the city of San Jose has made it much more achievable to develop a project within the Opportunity Zone timeline. So at the beginning of a project, there's a process of entitlements, there's a whole slew of design efforts, and then there's construction. And so one of the challenges with the Opportunity Zone is how can you do all this in a time frame that you can return to your investors in a timely manner? And so that's been one thing I think that has benefited San Jose a lot. And I'm not sure, Kunal, if you've seen similar challenges in other jurisdictions. And so I think it also takes a really savvy team to accomplish all of this.
I would just add really quickly that, from a technology point of view, there's just much more we can do in our buildings to reduce costs of operating them through software, through data, through technology, that one, certainly give a better return. There's good data out there now that a green building is worth more than the average or comparable non-green building. I think we'll start seeing that grow to include smart buildings, include healthy buildings, include other tangential types of buildings or investments to improve the building. But for me, one of the advantages is you can improve the performance of your building. And by that, I mean the occupants, how they perform in that building, the operators, how they run that building, and the owners, how they profit off that and benefit from that building. All those can be done in some cases in a much more quick fashion from collect historic data for maybe you already have years of data, or maybe you collect for a few months, and you can very quickly identify problems and where to focus your efforts. And then if you do want to make capital improvements, you can do that with a little more of a baseline of where can I best focus those capital investments.
Yeah, this shift towards healthy and smart buildings. And you just look at COVID, for example, all of a sudden, a very strong business case for a healthy building.
Yep.
When the virus dissipates a little bit, everyone has a new sense of their personal bubble and indoor air quality. And so over the, say, 5-10 years, there's been a lot of focus on healthy buildings. But now I think when developers can actually see that it's going to be a demand, because those who are occupying buildings have a new sense of what it means to be safe in your work environment. And a few years ago, 5 years ago, we did a project for Shark Development in Sunnyvale, and it was a tilt-up concrete building, and we converted it to a net zero energy project. And their push, Shark Development, really wanted to determine, is there a business case for net zero energy buildings. And so we proved at that point in time that yes, there is a business case, because if you can pull this off, then you can offer a much lower lease to your tenants. So now I think we're seeing the same trend with healthy buildings. And there's certain things that are helping us, the technologies. I can let Joe get into that in a little bit more detail. But there's simple things like outdoor spaces. New buildings have a really great opportunity to have outdoor amenities, and suddenly that's going to be in the spotlight for anyone, say a commercial tenant who wants to occupy a building, and there's a roof deck. And then we're talking about the business case. A few years ago, the BOMA standard now allows those roof decks to be considered rentable area for a tenant. So you're starting to see those shifts where the outdoor amenities are much more profitable for developers. And it also, I think, competitive advantage, say for a building in a downtown environment, to have that outdoor amenity. And we've looked at opportunities to add roof decks to existing buildings, and it's just logistically complicated and prohibitively expensive. So why not build that opportunity into a new development? And then another thing I wanted to add is just with the smart and healthy buildings focus is there's a shift now towards mass timber construction. We have an energy crisis, and reduction of our carbon footprint has become a huge priority. And so with timber frame structures, there's actually much reduced carbon footprint on the construction. And the other impact is biophilia. So there are studies that show very clearly that productivity among office workers when they are within a natural setting, it greatly increases their productivity. So these are kinds of things that we're seeing, that there is data now that shows that smart and healthy buildings are penciling out for developers. So within opportunity zones, I think these are great ways that we can introduce healthier buildings. And I think, Joe, we can touch a little bit on some of the other technologies that are allowing us to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Stephanie, great points all across the board. I think big picture, I'm seeing, you could say opportunity zones have maybe accelerated some of the investment, but I also think that coronavirus has absolutely accelerated some of the investment. I tend to look at a green building and the certification itself is a way to prove out that you've made these investments. But a lot of the things that are called for in a green building, daylighting to reduce lighting loads, also is a way to improve the healthiness of that building, right? So people are more productive if they have natural light. People are more productive if they have better airflow. Well, if you have a more efficient and more reliable air conditioning system, that also that'll give you lower energy consumption, but it'll also give you more airflow, more comfort, more productivity. So there's really an array of technologies. I think one of the big other trends I've seen is given that people are getting comfortable working remote. We talk about how we're doing a talk right now. We were talking before our event about conferences online and how it's new, but it tends to work in a lot of ways. Building operators are also doing the same thing. They're connecting to their buildings remotely. And historically, you saw a little bit of hesitancy to do this. Well, I want to be in the building. Is it secure for me to connect to my building remotely from an offsite? There are ways to do it. They're not always the most advanced ways, but you saw kind of this inflection point of, well, I have to do it because I don't want to send everyone into the office. A lot of these big buildings are not getting shut down, and data bears that out. Even if they have 5% occupancy, it's actually a really bad idea just to shut down a big commercial building. So you still need operators. You still need to actively manage those buildings. And getting comfortable with adopting technology in a time of crisis, I think will, in retrospect, be the inflection point of now we're comfortable with cloud-based technologies. Now we're comfortable with using data, changing how we operate. Because if you're a facility manager and you have one day in the office versus all 5 days, you're probably going to prioritize the things you need to do in your building differently than if you were there every single day. and that will probably be the prioritization will be done based on data on how your building is operating. So you're not walking every floor necessarily, you're walking the floors where you know there's a problem.
Right. So let me bring something in on this. So Prospect Silicon Valley just finished a major pilot project in partnership with Amazon Whole Foods, Arab, the city of San Francisco, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, leaders in energy efficiency, to look at how we could drive an incredibly difficult building type, grocery stores, down to as close to net zero as possible and as close to full electrification as possible. And it really did the project really drove some really great results, almost a complete elimination of natural gas usage in the building, including stoves and other things like that. But even with that shift of fuels, a net 40% reduction on already what was a relatively efficient building itself. So really good results in sort of driving down, and we were able to incorporate emerging technologies in fans and fan controls, and in energy storage, thermal energy storage, and a couple of other areas. But it was incredibly difficult, and it took outside investment well above and beyond what the project would have required through the California Energy Commission to make that happen. And it turned out that the number of opportunities we had to really incorporate emerging technology that sounded good really started to collapse once you really needed to look at, kind of long-term use of the building and what the owner was up for. So I said all that to ask Joe, what do you see, and also Stephanie, what do you see as kind of the path to getting new ideas into buildings where, risk aversion seems to be the name of the game, and kind of long-term liability is definitely going to be there? That's kind of question number one.
Yeah, this is an issue. I work with a lot of small companies. I just informally advise small companies in the smart building space in general. And you do have, if you think of an adoption curve, which obviously starts with early adopters, there's an early majority, there's a late majority. This is more just how technology in general is adopted, but it applies itself well to commercial buildings. You do have some risk aversion. It's real. I think on one hand, what we're seeing now is in a time of crisis, when it becomes obvious these are requirements, that can be an important driver. So just as I mentioned earlier, adopting the ability to remotely connect to a building or the building's operational systems, that's a good one. I do there's a lot of activity right now around certifications. There are healthy building certifications. Those obviously have gotten a little bit of a thrust given what's happening. There already is a model there. LEED and Energy Star has a kind of a certification program for buildings. But you're even seeing this around smart building technology. You're even seeing it down to the data that comes out of these buildings. How do we standardize how that data is presented and tagged? And I'm thinking of metadata, for example. So there's a lot of those activities happening, which I think will de-risk this to some degree. But at the same time, you're seeing companies partner more versus we're trying to disrupt the world. You think we're in the Bay Area, and you point to all these companies that disrupted an old business model. I'm not convinced that is exactly the strategy you should be using in buildings. And I think a lot of smaller and mid-sized companies are figuring that out. Rather than disrupting the entire tech stack or the value chain, can we instead pick an area, be very innovative, and work with others? And with Prospect Silicon Valley, we're actually working on an effort right now, which I'm sure we can share more details on, an open call to help bring in innovative ideas into an existing effort that's being led by the city of San Francisco and the U.S. Department of Energy on modeling energy efficiency and energy efficiency conservation measures in small commercial buildings. And what we're doing is trying to help supplement the existing model of measures, or the model and its measures, with new ideas. That's a hugely valuable effort because it gives companies new avenues to get to market and to scale.
Right.
I
Stephanie?
would add that I just think over time, this stuff will naturally shift. And, there was a time when putting solar panels on buildings seemed progressive. Now we're looking at, smart. Yeah. There are so many different types of smart glass that you can implement in your building to augment the energy performance of those windows. And there's competition now. So that's bringing the prices down. It's bringing the quality of the warranties, and the technology has to compete. So because that is one emerging technology that very soon, I mean, how long would it be before that could just become industry standard? If you want to have a high performance building, smart glass. There are other things. Think about right now what's going on with the fires in California. Everybody knows now that there's this thing called purple air that measures the air quality. And the well building standard, for example, encourages natural ventilation of buildings, but it has a requirement that those windows must close naturally or alert the occupants to close the windows if the air quality is not healthy. And so these sorts of things, just by natural and unnatural occurrences, are getting more awareness in the market, and I think could be easily implemented over time.
One quick one. I know we're getting close on time, Doug, but I also just wanted to add the other trend you're seeing. Sorry?
We have plenty of time.
Oh, okay. Well, the other trend I was just going to note, you're seeing on one hand, it's a problem. You see facility managers tend to be older. The average age, I think, in the U.S. is 51 and over 51 years old, almost 52 years old. I read a report from a couple years ago. It was, I think, an effort between IFMA, the International Facility Management Association, and RICS, which is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, also an FM professional organization. And they, within their membership groups, have had, and this is like 2016, 2017, more members over the age of 70 than under the age of 30, which is pretty incredible when you think about it, given that retirement age across all these countries is significantly under 70 anyway. And if you're a facility manager, you may do a two-year technical college. So by the time you're 20, you could be a facility manager, 10 years of work, and there are fewer people. So while that's a challenge, because there's good research, if you have operators in your building, you will see reductions in energy, improvements in comfort. You also now have an opportunity to attract younger talent to the industry. And there are initiatives to do just this, especially amongst women, minorities, other groups that are not traditional facility managers, which is a huge benefit, a great thing. But I think that will lead to more comfort adoption of technology, because even now I've talked to recruiters for large facility management companies. They say, yeah, when we hire younger employees, we put them in our smartest buildings. We put them in our most advanced buildings. They're very comfortable with the technology. It's like a certainty, versus older employees. They may be comfortable, but they may not. And I think that is also one of the trends that we'll see. As you have a younger influx of talent, you will just naturally see more technology. And some of these people, to Stephanie's point, they might have, we have an indoor air quality sensor at our house. We just use it because of wildfires, because we have young kids, because of all these things. So even if I wasn't in this industry, I would have some level of understanding of airflow, of air quality. And if I was getting into facility management, between that plus my knowledge of just consumer products that are available in the market, that may actually be the thrust that I would need to take this, to be more data driven and to adopt some of these technologies for my career.
Got it. And I think as you both mentioned, emerging technology is expensive, and it's not often that an emerging technology comes in and actually knocks out competition on price. And so it does take a while for adoption to happen. It's especially challenging when you're talking about small buildings, because they don't often get the engineering attention that larger buildings can kind of just de facto afford. So, Prospect Silicon Valley is looking at this very seriously, and we're developing a number of pilots. Joe mentioned the project with the city of San Francisco, but we're also looking at how we can translate digital energy efficiency approaches that are commonly now being used in large buildings towards small buildings. And I think and we're looking at other projects that are similar. I think what's going to be important is getting information into the hands of building owners, developers, and designers that is actually relevant to their ability to design. It is definitely a challenge, and I think it's something that is especially important for this opportunity zone discussion, because many of the investments we're talking about, as I think Colleen was demonstrating in the size of the funds, are smaller projects. And I think it's going to be a special challenge that we have to kind of work together on. We do have some additional time, and there is time for additional questions for those of you that can continue. I think we're going to see some folks drop off because of the noon hour. There was a question that I just wanted to kind of pose to Stephanie here about how the architectural community might be using the substantial improvement test and identifying costs for rehab for smart buildings, for business purchase of buildings. Is there maybe some perspective you can share on that question? And you can see that in the Q&A, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm looking at that question right now. And so I don't have particular cost information in front of me. I'd be happy to try and follow up. But I want to share with you the India Way project that I mentioned earlier. And, this hopefully you can see my screen now. This was just an old tilt-up warehouse, right? And so you start with, and there are so many buildings like this in San Jose, right? And so the message here is that between the existing building, which was fairly dilapidated and useless, a few small moves made this a real business case for sharp development. The solar panels and some of these smart glazing technologies, and then just a little bit of architectural improvements to attract tenants, and a net zero lease. So what that meant was that if the building was allowed to operate in the way it was designed and planned, that the lease structure was much cheaper because the tenant no longer needed to pay for all the demands of the building infrastructure. So, natural ventilation, fan technology, operable windows, solar, all these things contributed greatly to making this pencil out for the developer. And so whoever asked the question, I'd be happy to follow up on some more specifics if that was answering the question.
Well, and I think that also illustrates that, what we're talking about here when we're talking, opportunity zone investments and really driving energy efficiency, technology advantage, et cetera, it can still be really beautiful. It can still be a really inspiring space, as a matter of fact. And I'd kind of like to wrap up on this idea. In order to transform a neighborhood, it's not that you build one really good looking building and expect everybody else to jump in. You need to create a space that people remember. You need to create a space that people are attracted to. Again, just Stephanie and really Kunal and others here, it's really important that what we're also doing is we're creating an environment that people will want to improve, that they'll want to see investment in. It creates an optimism and it creates a forward motion that can only create more momentum in that space. And maybe you could kick off that idea, Stephanie, with kind of your kind of ethos as an architect when you're looking at what you leave behind after the dust is literally cleared and the ribbon is literally cut.
Can I start with asking the question of why are these communities blighted in the first place, right? There could be a number of reasons, just the financial situation of that community, but also from a placemaking standpoint, there could be aging buildings, there could be lack of infrastructure, maybe it's not a pedestrian-friendly area. There's maybe not a diversity of uses on the street, so at times it's active and at times it's not. There could be crime associated with the lack of eyes on the street. And so when we look at opportunities to create complete communities it's really trying to address all those issues. And so I think the key is creating places that people want to be, creating anchors that will bring people to certain areas. And that's why it's easy to address, from a real estate standpoint, it's easy to address downtown San Jose because some of these anchors are getting built. And it's a little more challenging in some of these other neighborhoods that might be facing multiple challenges of large scale that are hard to address. But I do want to share, one project that we've been working on in Sacramento. And for me, the key is in placemaking. And so Kunal and I were talking about earlier development in Sacramento. And so one of our projects that we've been working with the developer has been the rail yards in Sacramento. And this is a 244 acre site. And I think the key to share here is we've talked about aging infrastructure as an issue. This is a site that's been in the works for 30 years trying to clean this up. And the city of Sacramento has done its part. And now the developer, LDK Ventures, can now start to imagine what this space could look like. And so when we're talking about complete communities and eyes on the street and pedestrian friendly, they've planned a soccer stadium there. They've got a Kaiser Permanente facility. There's a mix of residential uses. There's a mix of commercial buildings and several other, there's a waterfront, and then there's a major transportation center. And all these things are creating a thriving community stitched together with a pedestrian-friendly urban fabric. And I think the other key that I want to share is creating districts that celebrate the existing history of the space. And I know San Jose, for example, has really struggled with the identity of downtown San Jose. What is special about the history of downtown San Jose to us? And so as an example, in the rail yards here, one of the developments that we're looking at right now is one that really celebrates the historic rail yard, industrial look and feel, and creating these pockets of space that draw people from the community. And I think this is my challenge to opportunity zone investors is how can we engage the community and create rich spaces and identify specific districts and build upon the history of what we have to create really great spaces and refer to the others to add their.
Excellent. Thoughts? Kunal, Colleen?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just jump in briefly. So I love that you highlighted the rail yards. I spent a lot of my career in Sacramento. I was the chief of staff to the mayor there for a long time. Worked really hard to help get that soccer stadium placed there, and I've been working with master developers on that for a lot of years. And I think it's a great metaphor for what this program can be more broadly. Everybody here has heard of that expression, never let out of crisis comes opportunity. And in this case, out of, weakness can come strength. So for Sacramento, the rail yards was an eyesore for decades. You literally would get off the highway to the front door of the city and half of your view was just a big, ugly dirt field for decades, right? And politicians cycle through all well-intended saying like, we're gonna be the ones to fix it, and then nothing happens. So by the time, our team came in 2009, you just get eye rolls about, oh yeah, sure, you're gonna fix the rail yards. But slowly but surely, all the environmental mitigations get done. You get the overpass to connect roads and like all this basic stuff started to happen. And now we're in a place where because it took so long to get this thing going, that's actually now an advantage because you have a clean slate, unperturbed by kind of legacy infrastructure to try to reimagine how you knit together in an urban environment. And it sits in an opportunity zone. And so the developers are really good visionary people. They obviously have very talented folks working with them. And this is a story that's happening all around California and the country, which is all these areas that have been underinvested in all this time. That it's unfortunate, but now if there's courage and creativity and capital, they can be on the forefront and the frontier of the new, better way to build and establish communities. And what I heard here was quadruple bottom line projects that have a financial return, that have a social return, that have an environmental return, and now we have to talk about having a public health return. And how cool would it be for the designers of this world, the investors, the developers, to have demonstration projects in the hardest to invest in neighborhoods that hit quadruple bottom lines? Because if we can do it there, we can do it everywhere else. So if you're an evangelist for any of these things, you should be motivated to try to make opportunity zone investments work, because then you'll get scale. Because if we can do it at the rail yards, we can do it all over the place. We can do it all over the state. We can do it all over the country. So I'm super excited by this. And I really hope we can get some proof points that motivate scale.
Excellent. Final thoughts, Colleen, Joe?
Sure. I would just add, as us as an administrator and making sure that things do, the good happens as it's supposed to do, making sure this incentive does the good it's intended to do, is one of the members of kind of the team or the piece of the puzzle. Want to add to the fact that we want to make sure that all the compliance and all the regulatory issues are check off the box, and making sure that people that do want to get into this realm of opportunity zone investing or creating a fund can navigate through all the complexity of it. And we're here to help with that process and make sure that it succeeds and this program does that good it's intended to do, as I mentioned.
Excellent. Joe, Nathan?
I thought I would just wrap up by, oh, sorry, Joe. I'll just,
I
want to share,
you go ahead.
Thank you. I want to share two things before we go. Kind of my, one of the projects we're really excited about from Colleen's client is this. This is the former Camera 12 Theater in downtown San Jose. Unfortunately, the theaters are undergoing a lot of disruption right now, and this closed a couple of years ago, and Urban Catalyst has acquired the site, and they will very shortly be renovating the structure to a pretty cool office space, but with a lot of retail, 22,000 square feet, which is nothing to shrink at downtown. Which is really great, right? It's at a key kind of gap in the smile of our Paseo, right across from some of our key theater and live theater and cultural institutions. And it's just been really sad to see it this way. And so I'm excited to have some concrete examples of some opportunity fund projects that really do good, sort of unambiguous good to improve the neighborhood. To point to when people kind of want to look and kind of get a feel for what's actually happening on the ground. And then finally, some of the things I'm thinking about as we go forward is obviously what Kunal is thinking about too, is sort of what does COVID-19 do to the investment market? Can business investing catch on? So late 2019, we get the finally, right, after so long, the new rules and regs on business investing. Can work, and what are the models? I found one clean tech startup that moved to San Jose in order to take advantage of opportunity fund investing, which is awesome, but they haven't actually executed yet on that. But can that really be a thing? Right. What are the other creative investment asset classes that we didn't talk about today, like infrastructure? And there's a lot of publicly owned land in our zones. And in other zones, the VT owns a ton of stuff in there, a couple of BART stations, kind of what can be done with that. And then finally, this discussion about, what is the public owed from a transparency standpoint is a really robust conversation happening at the federal, state, local level. And Colleen's work is so important to know what's happening in the aggregate, but how could we benefit from having a little more visibility into what's actually happening with these deals in our communities, and then kind of what would we do with that information is something I'm thinking a lot about, because if there is a change in the administration and in the makeup of Congress, I think it's likely that maybe there would be some tweaks on that issue. There seems to be bipartisan support. So those are just some of the things I'm thinking about as we move forward.
Yeah, we definitely think that OZs are going to be here for a long time. We do believe that even if there was a change in administration, both sides in the race right now are supporting this concept. So that's really great. Joe?
I don't have a lot more to add. I think, we're at the front end versus the back end of what we're going to see out of how our buildings perform, what they deliver to us. I really, truly believe that there's a lot of uncertainty on one hand around what happens next. Do people come back to the office en masse? Do they come back in some flexible way? That's, you could argue, is the same for retail, for restaurant, for a lot of other facilities out there. Are there ways for an opportunity zone structure to help, make a building COVID safe? I don't know that that's the term we'll be using, but I suppose it could be. But at the same time, I think we will look back on this as an inflection in a good way, right? Because things will get back to normal. People will get back to the office. We will realize that there's value in being together in person. I'm not trying to preach here at all, but and if the best part about this is we have more focus on the healthy and wellness aspects of buildings, and we have we're more cognizant of that as just individuals in buildings. That's a good thing. And if this has become a big tailwind to invest in those technologies and then learn in the real world the value of them, that just becomes a snowball effect that more and more buildings and firms and investors in this space will say, there's a lot of ways that we can really make these buildings more advantageous for everyone involved.
Right. Well, that's excellent. So I think a wise person once said, you can measure the quality of your life by the friends you keep. And Prospect Silicon Valley is really, and me personally, I personally am really glad that we can call you all friends. This has been a great conversation. Are really excited by what everybody has brought to the table today. And for those of you that have stuck with us to the end, we're really glad that you have that you've joined us. I'm going to be thinking about quadruple bottom line for the rest of the day.
I like that. Yeah.
That's super cool. So thank you, everyone. For more information about Prospect Silicon Valley, you can visit prospectsv.org. Taylor has shared information to join our mailing list, and we all very much appreciate your attention today. And thank you all for being part of this experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Doug.
Have a great day.
Take care.